The fog clung to the Thames like a shroud, muffling the distant clang of London's iron bridge. It was midnight when the constable's lantern pierced the gloom, revealing a ghastly sight. Sir Reginald Caldwell, the iron magnate, lay sprawled in the mud, a dagger protruding from his chest. Blood pooled around his tailored coat, his eyes frozen in eternal surprise. Who could have slain him here, under the bridge he himself had built? As whispers of scandal rippled through the night, one name emerged from the shadows. Hercule Poirot, the Belgian detective whose little grey cells never failed. But this puzzle promised twists that even he might not foresee. Chapter 1. The Foggy Discovery. The fog descended upon the Thames like a vengeful spirit, thick and impenetrable, weaving its tendrils through the skeletal arches of London's iron bridge. It was the sort of night in the autumn of 1932 when the city seemed to hold its breath, the distant hum of motorcars and the occasional hoot of a river barge swallowed by the miasma. The bridge itself, a marvel of Victorian engineering, loomed overhead, a colossal edifice of wrought iron, its girders groaning faintly under the weight of the damp air, as if protesting the chill that seeped into every rivet. Sir Reginald Caldwell, the man who had commissioned its expansion a decade prior, had often boasted that it symbolized the unyielding strength of British industry. Iron, he would say, bent for no one. Little did he know that on this fateful evening, beneath its shadow, his own life would be bent and broken. It was precisely at the stroke of midnight when Constable Elias Jenkins, a young officer on his nocturnal patrol along the embankment, first sensed that something was amiss. The fog muffled sounds, but his ears, attuned to the night's subtle rhythms, picked up an unnatural splash. A gurgle, perhaps, or the settling of mud disturbed. He adjusted his helmet, the beam of his bull's-eye lantern cutting a narrow swath through the gloom. "Who's there?" he called out. His voice echoing hollowly again cradled his form, but it was the face that struck Jenkins like a blow. A prominent moustache, greying at the edges, twisted in an expression of profound surprise, and eyes, wide and unblinking, fixed on the iron lattice above, as if accusing the very structure of his demise. Protruding from the centre of his chest was a dagger, its blade buried to the hilt, the ornate silver handle engraved with intricate floral motifs that glinted mockingly in the lantern light. Jenkins fumbled for his whistle, blowing a series of shrill blasts that pierced the fog like a siren's wail. "Murder! Murder most foul!" he shouted, his voice cracking with the weight of the discovery. He knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb the scene, though his hands trembled as he checked for signs of life. None. The man's skin was already cooling, the blood pooling around him in a viscous, darkening puddle that mingled with the river's silt. Who was this unfortunate soul? Jenkins's mind raced. The bridge was a known haunt for vagrants and lovers seeking privacy, but this was no pauper. The quality of his attire spoke of wealth, of the upper echelons of society that rarely ventured into such shadowed realms. Word of the discovery spread like ripples on the Thames, reaching the nearby police station within minutes. Sergeant Harold Mills, a veteran of the force with a face weathered by years of London's grime, arrived post-haste, his bicycle skidding to a halt on the slick pavement. "Blimey, Jenkins," he muttered, dismounting and approaching with measured steps. Mills was a stout man in his 40s, with a bushy moustache that rivaled the victim's, and eyes that had seen too many tragedies to widen in shock. He shone his own lantern over the scene, illuminating the gruesome tableau. "Good Lord above," he breathed, kneeling to examine the dagger more closely. The handle bore no immediate identifying marks beyond the engravings, perhaps a family heirloom or a custom piece. Stabbed clean through by the look of it. Single blow to the heart. Professional, I'd wager, or at least practiced. Mills rose and barked orders to Jenkins. "Secure the area, lad. No one in or..." Arrived from Scotland Yard, accompanied by a pair of constables and a forensic photographer. The fog had thickened further, turning the embankment into a spectral stage. Jap, a burly figure with a perpetual scowl etched into his ruddy features, stepped from his motor car with the air of a man who had little patience for theatrics. "Right then," he growled in his Cockney-inflected baritone, lighting a cigarette as he surveyed the scene. "What's all this, then? Another drunk fished out of the drink?" But one glance at the body dispelled any levity. Bloody hell. It's Caldwell. The Iron Baron himself. This'll make headlines from here to Timbuktu. Jap's team set to work with efficiency born of routine. The photographer's flashbulbs popped like fireworks, capturing the body's position, the dagger, the surrounding mud. Constables strung up ropes to cordon off the area, while Mills relayed Jenkins's account. Jap nodded curtly. "Looks like a robbery gone south. But those pockets are empty, save for a wallet with a few quid and some calling cards. No. This reeks of something personal. Enemies aplenty in his line of work. Rival magnates, disgruntled workers, maybe even a jealous husband, if the rumors hold." Jap was no stranger to Caldwell's reputation. The man had been investigated before for sharp business practices, though nothing stuck. "Bag the dagger and that watch, and scour for footprints, though this mud'll swallow 'em whole." As the investigation unfolded under the bridge's iron gaze, miles away, in the genteel confines of Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot reclined in his armchair, savouring the delicate aroma of his evening tisane. The Belgian detective, small of stature but immense in intellect, adjusted his velvet smoking jacket and gazed out at the rain-slicked streets of London. Poirot's apartment was a sanctuary of order, Persian rugs in precise alignment, a ticking grandfather clock marking the seconds with metronomic precision, and on the mantel, a row of porcelain figurines, a iron bridge of his. The whole city's buzzing about it already. Jap's on the case, but you know how he is. Blusters more than he deduces. I thought of you immediately. This one's got all the makings of a proper puzzle. Poirot's eyes sparkled with interest, his moustache twitching like a cat's whiskers sensing prey. Caldwell, eh? The man of iron. I have read of him in the financial pages. Ruthless, ambitious, a builder of empires. And now, felled by a mere dagger beneath his own monument. Symbolic, non? The iron that does not bend, except to the will of a murderer. He rose, pacing the room with measured steps. Tell me more, mon ami. The details. They are everything. Hastings recounted what he had gleaned from a hurried telephone call to a Scotland Yard contact. The foggy discovery, the dagger, the stopped watch. Jap thinks it's a business rival. Caldwell was in a row with Victor Hargrove over some merger yesterday. Nasty business, threats exchanged in public. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Ah, Hargrove. A brute of a man, I believe. Red-faced, hot-tempered. But motives, they are like the fog, thick and obscuring. We must see the scene ourselves. George, my hat and coat. Hastings, you drive. To the bridge, with all haste. The journey through the fog-shrouded streets was a tense affair, the motorcar's headlights barely piercing the veil. Hastings gripped the wheel tightly, narrating snippets of Caldwell's life as they went. He was a widower first, you know. Married Lady Eleanor 5 years back. Society wedding, but whispers of unhappiness. And there's a son from the first marriage, Edmund, a bit of a wastrel. Gambling debts, they say. Poirot listened intently, his mind already weaving threads. Family, always the heart of the matter. And the bridge, why there? A clandestine meeting, perhaps? Or lured to his doom? They arrived as dawn began to grey the sky. And this, Poirot continued, pointing to a bloodied glove discarded a few feet away. Leather, fine quality, size of a man's hand, large, initials embroidered, V.H. Japp snorted. Victor Hargrove, that's who, Caldwell's rival. They argued yesterday at the club. Hargrove stormed out in a rage. Glove's a dead giveaway. Poirot's expression remained enigmatic. Too dead, perhaps. A giveaway so obvious, it screams of misdirection. Like a stage magician's flourish. He rose, dusting his knees. But we shall see. Inspector, who inherits this empire of iron? The family. They must be interviewed. Japp eyed him suspiciously. Lady Eleanor's at the manor, playing the grieving widow. Son's holed up somewhere. And that secretary of his, Amelia Thorne. Fishy business there, if you ask me. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, the web begins to spin. Hastings, to the Caldwell estate. The fog may lift, but the shadows of deceit, they linger. As they departed, the iron bridge cast its long shadow over the scene, a silent witness to the intrigue that was only just unfolding. Little did they know, the true killer watched from afar, plotting the next thread in the tapestry of lies. Chapter 2. The Grieving Widow. The Caldwell estate, nestled on the verdant outskirts of London, rose from the morning mist like a monument to bygone opulence. Its Georgian facade, with ivy-clad columns and tall sash windows, spoke of wealth tempered by time, the stonework weathered yet proud, much like the family it housed. The fog that had choked the Thames the previous night lingered here, curling around the wrought iron gates and shrouding the manicured lawns in an ethereal veil. It was October 1932, and the air carried a damp chill that seeped into the bones, as if the very landscape mourned the violent death of Sir Reginald Caldwell. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat and polished shoes, stepped from Captain Hastings' auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her features delicate yet hardened by years of navigating high society. In her hands, a lace handkerchief fluttered like a trapped moth, and her green eyes, red-rimmed, flickered with something between grief and wariness as she rose to greet them. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, she said, her voice soft but steady, with the cultured cadence of the aristocracy. Thank you for coming. This tragedy has undone us all. She gestured to a pair of velvet-upholstered chairs, inviting them to sit. The fire crackled, its warmth at odds with the chill in her tone. Poirot bowed, his manner as precise as a clock's gears. Madame, my deepest condolences for your loss. The death of Sir Reginald. It is a blow to London, And to you most of all, no? Permit me to ask a few questions that we may bring justice to this dark affair. Lady Eleanor nodded, dabbing her eyes with the handkerchief. Of course, anything to find who did this monstrous thing. She sank back into her chair, the picture of a grieving widow, though Poirot's keen gaze noted the faintest tremor in her fingers. A telltale sign, perhaps, of more than sorrow. Hastings, ever the gentleman, leaned forward, his tone gentle. Lady Eleanor, can you tell us where you were last evening, around the time of the incident? She hesitated, her eyes drifting to the fire. I was here, at home, alone, save for the staff. Reginald often worked late at his office or attended meetings in the city. Last night, he said he had business near the Iron Bridge. A contract discussion, I believe. He left after dinner, around 8 o'clock. Her voice wavered, and she pressed the handkerchief to her lips. I never imagined. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly, though his expression remained courteous. And your marriage, madame? It was a happy one, I presume. Lady Eleanor stiffened, her fingers his eyeballs, loan sharks circling. We're tracking him down now. Poirot raised a hand, his gesture silencing Japp's bluster. Patience, mon cher inspecteur. Motives, they are like threads in a tapestry. Many, tangled, and not all lead to the truth. He turned back to Lady Eleanor, his voice smooth as velvet. Madame, you mentioned the will. Sir Reginald's fortune. It passes to you, no? She nodded, her composure faltering for a moment. Yet, the bulk of it. Reginald was generous, though he set aside funds for charities and a small trust for Edmund, if he reforms. But surely you don't think I... Her voice broke, and she looked away, the firelight casting shadows across her face. Poirot smiled enigmatically, his eyes never leaving her. Think? No, madame. I merely observe. The facts, they arrange themselves in my mind, and the little grey cells, they begin to work. He rose, pacing slowly before the hearth, his cane clicking softly. Tell me, who else was close to your husband? Associates, perhaps, or others more personal? Lady Eleanor's lips thinned, and for a moment a spark of defiance flashed in her eyes. You mean Amelia Thorne, don't you? His secretary. The word dripped with disdain. She's a young woman, ambitious, always hovering about him. I saw the way she looked at him. Too familiar, if you ask me. Reginald denied anything improper, but... She trailed off, her hand clenching the handkerchief. Hastings glanced at Poirot, sensing the undercurrent. This Miss Thorne, she was with him often. Far too often, Lady Eleanor snapped, then caught herself, softening her tone. She managed his appointments, his correspondence. She was at the house frequently, even late at night, delivering papers or some such nonsense. I warned Reginald about appearances, but he laughed it off, said she was indispensable. Poirot paused by the mantel, his fingers brushing a framed photograph of Sir Reginald, standing beside a young woman with striking dark hair and a guarded smile. This is Mademoiselle Thorne. Hastings lit a cigarette, exhaling a plume into the damp air. Well, Poirot, what do you make of her? Playing the widow well enough, but those hands. She was nervous. Poirot nodded, his gaze distant. The Lady Eleanor. She performs admirably, but the performance, it is not flawless. Her grief, it is real, perhaps, but tempered by something else, Fear? Guilt? And this Amelia Thorne? A rival or a scapegoat? He tapped his cane thoughtfully. We must visit Monsieur Hargrove next. The glove found at the scene, marked with his initials. It is too convenient, no? Like a breadcrumb left for the birds. Their motorcar rumbled toward the city, where Victor Hargrove's office awaited in the heart of London's financial district. Hargrove, a rival industrialist whose steelworks competed fiercely with Caldwell's, was a man known for his temper and ambition. His office, a modern affair of glass and steel, stood in stark contrast to the manor's antiquity. Hargrove himself was a bear of a man, his face ruddy from years of port and shouting matches, his broad shoulders straining against a well-cut suit. When Poirot and Hastings were shown in, he was pacing behind a massive oak desk, papers scattered like autumn leaves. "What's this about?" Hargrove bellowed, slamming a fist on the desk. "Caldwell's dead, and you lot come sniffing round me? I didn't kill him, though God knows he deserved it." His voice echoed in the high-ceilinged room, rattling the model ships displayed on shelves. Poirot remained unruffled, seating himself with deliberate calm. "Monsieur Hargrove, you argued with Sir Reginald yesterday, did you not? At the gentlemen's club, over a proposed merger." Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "Aye, we did. He wanted to swallow my company whole, bleed me dry. I told him where he could stick his offer. But I was at the club all night. Dozens saw me. Alibis ironclad." "And this glove?" Poirot produced a sketch of the bloodied leather glove, initialed VH, provided by Jap. "Found at the scene. Yours, perhaps?" Hargrove's face darkened. "Miss Thorne visited often, late at night. Not just for work, if you catch my meaning. I heard them arguing once about a promise he broke." Hastings relayed this to Poirot as they drove back into the city, the fog thickening once more. "Sounds like an affair, Poirot. Motive for Lady Eleanor, perhaps? Jealousy?" "Or for Mademoiselle Thorne," Poirot mused. "A woman scorned, or one seeking to secure her place. But the glove, the watch stopped at 11:45, the muddied footprints, these are pieces of a puzzle that do not yet fit. We must visit this Amelia Thorne next." The motorcar wove through London's streets, the iron bridge's shadow lingering in their minds. The plot thickened, like the fog that refused to lift, and Poirot's little grey cells hummed with anticipation. Somewhere, a killer watched, their next move cloaked in the city's haze. Chapter 3. The Rival's Alibi. The fog that had cloaked London the previous night had retreated by mid-morning, leaving the city damp and glistening under a weak October sun. The streets bustled with the clatter of horse-drawn carts and the impatient horns of motor-cars, a cacophony that seemed to mock the sombre task Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings had undertaken. Their destination was a modest café near the Iron Bridge, a place frequented by dock workers and clerks, its windows steamed from the warmth within. The scent of fried bacon and strong tea wafted out as they entered, a stark contrast to the chill of the Thames embankment where Sir Reginald Caldwell's body had been found. Poirot, immaculate in his pinstriped suit and polished shoes, chose a corner table by a window, where he could observe both the room and the street beyond. Hastings, ever the practical Englishman, ordered steak and kidney pie for them both, though Poirot's attention was far from food. "Mon ami," Poirot began, stirring his tea with precision. "We have a puzzle most intricate. The glove, marked VH, found so conveniently at the scene, it is too obvious, no? A red herring, placed to divert us from the true killer." He leaned back, his green eyes gleaming. Mystery converge upon her. He sipped his tea, then set the cup down with a delicate clink. "But first, let us consider the watch," stopped at 11:45. Deliberate or damaged in a struggle? Their meal was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Japp, who slid into the booth with a grunt, his overcoat damp from a passing shower. "Morning, gents," he said, lighting a cigarette and exhaling a plume that mingled with the cafe's steam. "Got a lead on Edmund Caldwell, the son. He's holed up at a gambling den in Whitechapel, owing half the city to loan sharks. Motive enough to kill his old man, I'd say. And I've sent a constable to fetch Amelia Thorne, lives in a flat in Chelsea. Fishy character, that one." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Bon, Inspector. But tell me, what of the footprints in the mud beneath the bridge? Small, like a woman's, no?" Japp shrugged. "Mud's a mess, hard to be sure. But we found a button near the body, embroidered with A.T. Could be Amelia's. I'm betting she's involved, whether it's love gone sour or something else." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A button, you say? Most curious. We shall see this Mademoiselle Thorne ourselves." The trio finished their meal and drove to Chelsea, where Amelia Thorne's flat occupied the top floor of a modest brick building, its windows adorned with lace curtains that fluttered in the breeze. The street was quiet, lined with plane trees shedding their leaves, and the air carried the faint tang of coal smoke. Amelia answered the door promptly, her dark hair pinned loosely, her expression wary but composed. She was in her late 20s, with striking features, high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes that held a guarded intelligence. Her simple navy dress was well tailored, hinting at a salary above that of a typical secretary. "Detectives," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I expected you sooner." Poirot bowed slightly, his hat in hand. "Mademoiselle Thorne, I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings and Inspector Japp. May we enter? We seek to understand the tragedy of Sir Reginald." "I think you are more than a secretary." Amelia's lips tightened, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "Lady Eleanor sees what she wants to see." She ignored him, always caught up in her teas and charities. "But I was at the theatre last night, the mousetrap at the Ambassador's. I have the ticket stubs to prove it." She crossed to her desk, retrieving a pair of stubs, dated the previous evening, 8 p.m. Japp examined them, grunting. "Checks out, but theatres let out by 10. Plenty of time to get to the bridge by midnight." Poirot's attention was drawn to a letter on the desk, half covered by a ledger. "May I?" he asked, lifting it before she could protest. The envelope bore Caldwell's crest, and the note inside, written in a hurried hand, read, "My dear, the bridge at midnight." "This is from Sir Reginald, no? What did he mean by this meeting?" Amelia snatched the letter back, her composure slipping. "It was about documents. A contract he needed urgently, nothing more. I didn't go. I was at the theatre, as I said." Her voice trembled, but whether from fear or anger, Poirot could not yet tell. He studied her closely, noting the fresh ink on the letter, a detail at odds with its supposed urgency. "The ink, mademoiselle. It is too new for a letter written yesterday. A forgery, perhaps?" Her eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. "You're mistaken. It's his writing. I'd know it anywhere." As they left the flat, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "The letter, it is not genuine. The ink betrays it. And her reaction confirms it. She hides something. But is it murder? We must dig deeper." Their next stop was the gambling den in Whitechapel, a smoky, dimly lit establishment reeking of cheap gin and desperation. Edmund Caldwell, the victim's son, was slumped at a card table, his tie loosened and his face pale beneath a mop of dishevelled blonde hair. At 25, he had the dissipated look of a man who had squandered youth and fortune alike. When Japp announced their presence, he started, nearly toppling his chair. Wat's gaze lingered on the young man's nervous demeanor. You argued with your father recently, oui? About money? Edmund slumped. Yes, 2 days ago. He called me a disgrace, said he'd cut me off for good. But I didn't kill him, I swear it. As they left the den, Japp received a call from Scotland Yard, a new development. Someone had attempted to poison Lady Eleanor that morning, slipping arsenic into her breakfast tea. She had collapsed, but survived, thanks to a quick-thinking maid who induced vomiting. Blimey, Japp muttered. Someone's desperate to cover their tracks. They raced back to the Caldwell estate, where Lady Eleanor lay in a chaise longue, pale but composed, a doctor at her side. It was deliberate, she whispered, clutching a shawl. Someone wants me dead, too. Poirot examined the teapot, noting the faint chemical odour. Arsenic, indeed. But who had access to your tea, madame? Her eyes flickered with fear. The staff, Edmund, even Amelia. She was here yesterday, delivering papers. Anyone could have done it. Hastings leaned in, his voice low. Poirot, this is getting out of hand. First the murder, now poison. Could they all be in on it? Poirot shook his head, his expression grave. No, mon ami. One mind orchestrates this chaos, weaving a web of misdirection. The glove, the button, the forged letter, now poison. These are threads in a tapestry of deceit. He turned to Lady Eleanor. Madame, you saw nothing unusual this morning? She shook her head, but her eyes avoided his. Only Grayson, the butler, serving breakfast. He's been with us for years. Loyal. Poirot filed this away, his mind racing. The footprints under the bridge, small, possibly a woman's. The button marked A.T., too convenient, like the glove. And the watch, stopped at 11:45, perhaps set back to confuse the timeline. The killer is clever, he said to Hastings as they stepped outside, the sun now hidden behind gathering clouds. But cleverness betrays itself. We must find Mademoiselle Thorne's true role, and whether Edmund's muddied shoes tell us to Persian rug, his moustache quivering as his mind churned through the labyrinth of clues surrounding Sir Reginald Caldwell's murder. Hastings, seated in an armchair with a brandy in hand, watched his friend with a mix of admiration and impatience. Poirot, this case is a tangle, he said, swirling his glass. The glove points to Hargrove, the button to Amelia Thorne, and now poison in Lady Eleanor's tea. Are we chasing ghosts? Poirot paused, his green eyes glinting in the firelight. Non, mon ami, not ghosts, but shadows, cast by a single hand. The glove, too large for a woman, marked with Hargrove's initials, yet stolen. The button, embroidered A.T., yet conveniently placed. And the watch, stopped at 11:45, smashed deliberately, I am certain, to mislead us about the time of death. He tapped his temple lightly. The little grey cells, they protest against such obvious breadcrumbs. The killer wishes us to run in circles, but Hercule Poirot does not run. He observes. Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. You think it's a setup? Lady Eleanor and Hargrove, perhaps, working together? Or Edmund, with that mud on his shoes? Poirot shook his head, resuming his pacing. A partnership is possible, but unlikely. The motives, they overlap. Jealousy, greed, revenge. But one mind orchestrates this symphony of deception. We must return to the scene, Hastings. The iron bridge holds more secrets than it has yet revealed. The drive back to the Thames was a somber one, the rain intensifying into a steady downpour, that blurred the city's edges. The iron bridge loomed ahead, its latticework glistening like the skeleton of some great beast, its shadow stretching across the muddy embankment where Caldwell's body had been found. Poirot and Hastings, clad in overcoats and wielding umbrellas, descended to the crime scene, now cordoned off by Scotland Yard's ropes. The mud, churned by countless boots, was a quagmire, but Poirot's keen eyes scanned it with Inspector Japp, his overcoat sodden and his scowl deeper than usual. "Poirot, you're poking about again, eh? Well, you're in luck, or not. We've brought in Amelia Thorne, a witness, a tramp sleeping under the bridge, saw a woman matching her description near the scene around midnight, and that buttons from her coat. I'd wager my pension." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A tramp, you say? Most convenient. Let us speak with Mademoiselle Thorne at once." They found Amelia at Scotland Yard, seated in a stark interrogation room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her navy dress was the same as before, but her composure had frayed, her eyes darting as Japp loomed over her. "Miss Thorne," he barked, "your button was found at the scene, and a witness places you there. Care to explain?" Amelia's voice was steady, but her knuckles whitened. "I told you, I was at the theatre. The button I lost it weeks ago at a meeting with Sir Reginald. Someone must have taken it from my office. I'm being framed." Poirot seated himself across from her, his demeanour calm but probing. "Mademoiselle, you claim you were at the theatre until 10, yet the murder occurred near midnight. Where were you after?" "With friends," she said quickly, "at a cafe in Soho until nearly 1. They'll vouch for me." Japp snorted. "We'll check that. But this witness, he's certain it was a woman in a dark coat like yours, arguing with Caldwell under the bridge." Amelia's eyes flashed. "Then he's lying or mistaken. I wasn't there." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "And the letter we found in your flat? My dear, the bridge at midnight. You insisted it was Sir Reginald's, yet the ink was fresh. Why lie, mademoiselle?" Her face paled, but she held his gaze. I wrote it myself, as a draft for him. He dictated it, but I never sent it. It was for a business associate, not me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A draft, you say? Yet it bears his crest, and no business associate was mentioned. You were close to Sir Reginald, closer than a secretary. Genuine, I think. But the button, the letter, they are planted, like the glove. The killer wishes us to see only the surface." Their next lead came unexpectedly. A constable arrived with news. Edmund Caldwell had been spotted at the gambling den again, and a search of his belongings revealed a receipt from a costume shop dated 2 days prior. "A disguise, perhaps?" Hastings suggested as they drove to Whitechapel. "He could have slipped out, gone to the bridge." The den was as grim as before, its air thick with smoke and despair. Edmund, bleary-eyed and unshaven, sat at a poker table, his hands trembling as he clutched his cards. When Poirot and Hastings approached, he flinched, knocking over a glass of gin. "What now?" he snapped. "I told you, I was here all night." Poirot's voice was calm, almost paternal. "Monsieur Edmund, we have found a receipt, a costume shop, and your shoes. They bear mud from the Thames bank. Care to explain?" Edmund's face drained of colour. "The mud's from walking, like I said. And the costume, it was for a lark, a masked ball. Nothing to do with father." His voice cracked, and he looked away, his fingers drumming nervously. Japp, who had joined them, produced the receipt. "A cloak and mask, bought 2 days ago. Convenient timing, lad. And your croupier says you stepped out for a bit around midnight, to clear your head, he said." Edmund's eyes widened. I went to see father, all right, at the bridge. I needed money. Begged him one last time. He refused, laughed in my face. I left him alive, I swear, around 11:55. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And you saw no one else? No woman, perhaps, in a dark coat? Edmund shook his head. No one. Just fog and him, standing there like a bloody statue. As they left, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "The boy lies, or he omits. The mud, the receipt. They suggest involvement, but not murder. The timeline, it tightens." Back at the court, enemies multiply. As night fell, the rain intensified, drumming against the city like an impatient summons. Poirot stood by his window, gazing out at the darkened streets. The killer grows bold, Hastings. The burglary, the poison, the planted clues, they are desperate to keep us from the truth. But the little grey cells, they do not falter. Hastings shivered, glancing at the note. Iron will bend. What does it mean, Poirot? A challenge, Poirot replied, his voice low. The killer believes their plan is unbreakable, like Caldwell's iron. But even iron yields under pressure. He turned, his eyes alight with determination. Tomorrow we unravel more threads. The shadow moves closer. But so do we. In the darkness beyond, a figure watched from an alley, their face obscured by the rain. The game was far from over, and the stakes were rising with every drop that fell. Chapter 5. The Cryptic Note. The rain had ceased by the following morning, leaving London cloaked in a damp chill that clung to the cobblestones and seeped into the bones. The Caldwell estate, bathed in the pale light of an overcast October sky in 1932, stood as a silent sentinel of secrets, its ivy-clad walls whispering of the tragedy that had befallen its master. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the autumn breeze, stood in the Manor's drawing room, his keen eyes scanning the assembled suspects. The air was thick with tension, the fire in the hearth doing little to warm the atmosphere of distrust. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by his side, his notebook open, his honest face etched with concern. Inspector Japp, ever the pragmatist, leaned against the mantel, his cigarette smoke curling upward like a question mark. The cryptic note found in Amelia Thorne's office, "Iron will bend," lay at the heart of today's inquiry, its words a taunting riddle in the murder of Sir Reginald Caldwell. Poirot, his moustache perfectly symmetrical, addressed the room with the calm authority of a conductor before a symphony. "Mes amis, we gather to unravel the threads of this dark affair. The note, 'Iron will bend,' it is a clue, or perhaps a challenge, left by the killer. I invite you to share what it means to you." His voice, though soft, carried a weight that commanded attention, and the suspects shifted uneasily in their seats. Lady Eleanor Caldwell, clad in her widow's black, sat rigidly on a velvet settee, her lace handkerchief clutched like a talisman. Her green eyes, though red from recent tears, held a flicker of defiance. Victor Hargrove, the burly industrialist, occupied an armchair, his ruddy face set in a scowl, his fingers drumming impatiently. Amelia Thorne, released on bail but still under suspicion, perched on the edge of a chair, her dark hair loose and her expression guarded. Edmund Caldwell, the victim's dissolute son, slouched by the window, his bloodshot eyes avoiding the others. The butler, Grayson, hovered discreetly in the background, his presence almost invisible, yet noted by Poirot's watchful gaze. Was proud of his legacy. The note could be a threat to his empire, someone who wanted to destroy what he built. Her eyes met Poirot's, as if daring him to probe further. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Most interesting. The note, it is Symbolic, oui? But let us consider the will itself. Madame Caldwell, you inherit the bulk of the fortune, but I understand there is a codicil, a condition, perhaps, regarding infidelity? A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor's face paled, her handkerchief falling to her lap. "How dare you suggest," she began, her voice trembling with indignation. "The will is private, but yes, Reginald included a clause. If infidelity were proven, a portion of the estate would go to his charities. But I was faithful." Her words rang with conviction, yet her hands betrayed a nervous tremor. Jap snorted, flicking ash into the fire. "Faithful or not, someone tried to poison you yesterday, Lady Eleanor. That arsenic didn't get into your tea by accident. Someone's covering their tracks." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "The poison. It is a bold move, but clumsy, a distraction, perhaps, to shift suspicion. Let us return to the note. Iron will bend. It suggests a plan to undermine Sir Reginald's legacy, his empire, or his family." He turned to Amelia. "Mademoiselle Thorne, you were close to the victim. Did he ever speak of enemies who might wish to bend his will?" Amelia hesitated, her fingers twisting her bracelet. "He had rivals, Hargrove, for one, and workers he'd dismissed, unions he'd crushed, but nothing specific about a note like that." Her voice was steady, but her eyes flickered with unease. Hargrove slammed a fist on the armrest. "Don't drag me into this, girl. Caldwell blackmailed me over a deal gone sour, tried to bend me. But I was at the club, like I said. Alibis solid." Poirot's gaze shifted to Edmund, who squirmed under the scrutiny. "And you, Monsieur Edmund? You visited your father at the bridge. Real killer." Her outburst drew murmurs, and Hargrove nodded in agreement. Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Proof, madame, is like a mosaic, each piece meaningless until placed in the whole. But fear not, the picture forms." He turned to Jab. "Inspector, have you questioned the tramp who saw a woman at the bridge?" Jab nodded. "Aye, he's sticking to his story. A woman in a dark coat arguing with Caldwell around midnight. Swears it was Miss Thorne." Amelia stood, her face flushed. "He's lying. I was in Soho with friends. Check my alibi." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "We shall, mademoiselle. But let us consider another detail. Madame Caldwell, you admitted visiting the bridge at 12:10, finding your husband dead. Yet a witness, a dock worker, claims to have seen you earlier, near 11:30, disguised in a shawl." Lady Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Disguised? Preposterous! I went to confront Reginald about Miss Thorne, but he was already dead when I arrived. I dropped my button in shock. Nothing more." Hastings scribbled furiously, glancing at Poirot. "A dock worker, Poirot? That's new. Could he be mistaken?" "Or paid," Poirot murmured. "The web of lies grows tangled. Let us examine the will further. Monsieur Edmund, you mentioned disinheritance. Did your father change his will recently?" Edmund shifted, his voice low. "He threatened to, 2 days ago. Said I'd get nothing unless I shaped up, but I don't know if he did it." Jap interjected. "We're checking with the lawyer. If the will's changed, it could point to motive, especially for you, Lady Eleanor, or you, Edmund." The room erupted in protests, Hargrove's voice rising above the rest. "This is a circus. I'm no killer, and I won't sit here being accused." He stormed toward the door, but Jap's constables blocked his path. Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the chaos. Come, mes amis. The truth, it is near. But one—
They're trying to shut me up! Japp's men fanned out, but the shooter had vanished into the mist that was creeping back over the grounds. Poirot knelt by Hargrove, examining the greys. A warning, perhaps, he murmured, or another distraction. Hastings, breathless, whispered, Poirot, this is madness. The poison, now a shooting. Who's behind it? Poirot rose, his expression grave. One mind, Hastings. One cunning mind, weaving red herrings. The glove, the button, the note, now this. The killer fears we draw too close. He turned to the group, his voice commanding. No one leaves this estate tonight. The net tightens. As they returned to the manor, Poirot lingered by the garden path, his eyes scanning the ground. A glint caught his attention, a spent cartridge half hidden in the grass. He pocketed it, his mind racing. The note, "Iron will bend," echoed in his thoughts. Was it a metaphor for Caldwell's empire, his will, or something more personal? The footprints, the button, the glove, the watch, all pointed to different suspects, yet none fit perfectly. And now, a shooting to muddy the waters further. Back in the drawing room, Poirot gathered the suspects once more. Mes amis, the killer grows desperate. The shot at Monsieur Hargrove, it is no accident. Someone wishes to silence those who know too much. His gaze fell on Amelia. Mademoiselle, you were Sir Reginald's confidant. Did he ever mention a secret, something worth killing for? Amelia hesitated, then shook her head. He spoke of business rivalries, nothing more. But he was worried lately. Said someone was watching him. Lady Eleanor's voice was sharp. Watching him? You never mentioned that before. Amelia met her gaze defiantly. He didn't want you to know. Said it would worry you. Poirot filed this away, his mind turning to the timeline. Hargrove left the bridge at 11:40, Amelia at 11:50, Edmund around 11:55. Lady Eleanor arrived at 12:10, finding the body. Yet the watch, stopped at 11:45, suggested an earlier death, unless Tad whispered, but whose will, and to what end? The shadows deepened, and the killer, somewhere in the fog, plotted their next move. Chapter 6. Shadows in the Garden. The Caldwell Estate's gardens, drenched by the morning's rain, lay under a shroud of mist that clung to the neatly trimmed hedges and rosebushes like a ghostly veil. It was the evening of October 1932, and the air held a biting chill, as if the very earth recoiled from the violence that had erupted earlier. A gunshot aimed at Victor Hargrove, grazing his arm, and sending the investigation into a fevered spiral. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the garden path, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp gravel, his overcoat buttoned against the cold. His green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, scanned the shadows where the shooter had vanished, while Captain Arthur Hastings, ever loyal, hovered nearby, his umbrella raised against the drizzle that had begun anew. Inspector Japp, barking orders to his constables, combed the grounds for evidence, his cigarette glowing like a beacon in the gathering dusk. The cryptic note, "Iron will bend," weighed heavily on Poirot's mind, its meaning as elusive as the figure who had fired the shot. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Hastings, his voice low but resonant, "the killer grows reckless. The poison in Lady Eleanor's tea, now this shooting. They wish to silence or distract, but in their haste, they reveal themselves." He knelt, examining the spent cartridge he had found earlier, its brass casing glinting faintly. A pistol, small caliber, recently fired. No fingerprints, naturellement. The killer is cautious, but not infallible. Hastings shivered, glancing at the darkened trees. "It's madness, Poirot. First Caldwell's murder, then poison, now this. It's as if the whole household is at war. Could it be Hargrove himself, staging the attack to throw us off? Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. Possible, but unlikely. Monsieur Hargrove's fear, it was genuine. His eyes, they widened in shock, not calculation. No, the shooter is another, one who watches.
A hawk, his constables outside guarding the exit. Poirot took centre stage, his cane tapping lightly as he addressed the room. Mes amis, the events of today, a gunshot in the garden, confirm that the killer remains among us, desperate to protect their secret. Let us review. The glove, marked VH, points to Monsieur Hargrove, yet stolen. The button, AT, implicates Mademoiselle Thorne, yet planted. The watch, stopped at 11:45, misleads the timeline. And the note, iron will bend. A taunt, perhaps, or a key to the motive. Who among you knows its true meaning? Hargrove spoke first, his voice rough with pain and anger. I told you, it's Caldwell's blasted motto. He thought he could bend anyone. Me, his workers, even his family. Someone turned it back on him. He winced, clutching his arm. And now they're after me. I met Caldwell at the bridge, yes, 11:30, to settle a debt. I paid him off, left him alive by 11:40. That's the truth. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. And this debt, it was blackmail, no? Sir Reginald held something over you? Hargrove hesitated, then nodded. A deal gone wrong. Shady, I'll admit. He threatened to expose me, ruin my business. I paid to keep him quiet, but I didn't kill him. His eyes darted to Amelia. Ask her. She was always skulking about his office, listening. Amelia's face flushed, but her voice was steady. I was his secretary, not a spy. Reginald trusted me with his secrets, not you. She turned to Poirot. I met him at midnight, as the letter said, to discuss a contract. We argued. He was breaking promises, but I left him alive at 11:50. Poirot's gaze was piercing. Yet the watch suggests death at 11:45. How do you explain this, mademoiselle? She faltered, her fingers twisting her bracelet, trodden into the mud. Lady Eleanor's face paled. I was distraught. I didn't notice what I dropped. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Distraught, oui, but precise in your timing. And you, Monsieur Edmund, you admitted visiting your father at 11:55, begging for money. Yet mud from the Thames clings to your shoes. Did you see Mademoiselle Thorne, or anyone else? Edmund's hands shook, his voice hoarse. No one. Just father, laughing at me. I left him alive, I swear. His eyes darted to Amelia, a silent accusation. Poirot paced, his cane clicking rhythmically. The timeline, it is critical. Monsieur Hargrove departs at 11:40, Mademoiselle Thorne at 11:50, Monsieur Edmund at 11:55. Madame Caldwell arrives at 12:10, finding the body. Yet the watch, stopped at 11:45, suggests an earlier death, unless tampered with. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. And now, a shooting to muddy the waters further. Who had access to Mademoiselle Thorne's pistol? Amelia shook her head vehemently. Anyone could have taken it. My flat's not locked during the day. The staff, visitors, someone's setting me up. Hastings whispered to Poirot.
This is a mess, old chap. The poison, the shooting, all these clues pointing everywhere. Could they all be in on it? Poirot shook his head. No, Hastings. One mind weaves this web, using the others as pawns. The note, iron will bend, it is personal. A vendetta against Sir Reginald's empire or his family. He turned to the group. Let us consider another detail. Mademoiselle Thorne, you were close to Sir Reginald. Did he ever speak of a secret, perhaps from his past? Amelia hesitated, her eyes flickering. He mentioned a woman, years ago, someone he wronged. He was vague, said it haunted him, but he never named her. Lady Eleanor's voice was icy. How convenient. Another of your lies to deflect suspicion. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Enough. The past, it holds the key. Inspector Japp, have you investigated
Pistol, the button, the glove, all planted to confuse. And the note. Iron will bend. It speaks of breaking his legacy, perhaps by exposing his secrets. Hastings leaned in, his voice low. Poirot, if she's his daughter, the will's codicil, infidelity, could cut her out entirely. That's motive enough. Poirot nodded, but his expression remained skeptical. Oui, but the killer's hand is too clever. The shooting, the poison, these are acts of desperation, not calculation. He turned to Edmund. Monsieur, you mentioned an argument with your father. Did he speak of his will or of Mademoiselle Thorne? Edmund hesitated, then nodded. He said he'd changed it, cut me out unless I reformed. And he mentioned a letter, something about bending iron. I thought he meant his business. Poirot's moustache twitched. A letter, you say, not the note we found. Edmund shook his head. No, different. He was angry, said someone was threatening him. As the group dispersed, Japp's men reported no trace of the shooter in the gardens. Poirot lingered, his mind racing. The timeline tightened. Hargrove left at 11:40, Amelia at 11:50, Edmund at 11:55, Lady Eleanor at 12:10. The watch, stopped at 11:45, was a lie. Death occurred later, likely midnight or after, per the autopsy's rigor mortis. The pistol, the note, the button, all pointed to Amelia, yet Poirot sensed a deeper game. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot examined the cartridge again, its small size suggesting a woman's weapon, or a man's attempt to appear so. The killer plays with us, Hastings, he said, his voice low. They use Amelia's past, her pistol, her button, to paint her guilty. But the truth, it lies in the shadows. Hastings frowned. What about Grayson, the butler? He's always there, silent, watching. Poirot shook his head. A minor player, perhaps complicit, but not the mastermind. The note, iron will bend, it is rain-streaked glass, his green eyes reflecting the glow of a single lamp as he pondered the latest twist in the murder of Sir Reginald Caldwell. The anonymous letter, stop or die, lay on his desk. Its scrawled threat a stark reminder that the killer was growing desperate. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in an armchair, sipped a brandy, his honest face creased with worry. Poirot, this case is a devil's knot, he said, setting his glass down. Amelia Thorne, Caldwell's daughter. That's a bombshell. And now this threat. It's as if the killer's watching our every move. Poirot turned, his moustache twitching with purpose. Oui, mon ami. They watch. But they also falter. The revelation of Mademoiselle Thorne's lineage. It is a key, but not the lock. The glove, the button, the watch, the note. Iron will bend. All are threads in a tapestry woven by a cunning hand. But this letter. He lifted the threatening note. It betrays fear. The killer senses the net tightening. He paced, his cane clicking softly on the rug. We must confront Mademoiselle Thorne again, alone. Her past, it holds the heart of this mystery. Their destination was Amelia's Chelsea flat, a modest sanctuary now tainted by suspicion. The rain had returned, a soft patter against the cobblestones, and the street lamps cast long shadows as Poirot and Hastings approached. Amelia answered the door, her dark hair loose, her eyes weary but defiant. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady despite the strain. I expected you'd return. Come in. The parlour was as before. Bookshelves, a typewriter, wilting roses. But the air felt heavier, charged with unspoken truths. Poirot seated himself, his gaze piercing. Mademoiselle Thorne, we know the truth of your birth. You are the daughter of Sir Reginald Caldwell, born to a seamstress he abandoned. Tell me, did this betrayal drive you to murder? Amelia's face, the key. Mon ami, fetch me a similar pocket watch from my desk. There, in the drawer. Hastings complied, retrieving a silver timepiece, which Poirot examined. Let us test a theory. He smashed the watch against the desk's edge, the glass cracking, the hands freezing at the moment of impact. Voila! A watch, when smashed, stops instantly. The killer set it back to 11:45 to mislead us. The true time of death, it is later, perhaps 12 or 12:05. Amelia's eyes widened. Then I'm innocent. I was in Soho by 12 with friends. You can ask them. Poirot's expression remained enigmatic. We shall verify, mademoiselle. But tell me, this note, Iron will bend. Did you write it, or see it before? She shook her head. No. I found it in his office, slipped under papers. I thought it was his, about business. But it scared me. It felt like a threat. Poirot filed this away, his gaze drifting to the roses, their petals curling in decay. A threat, oui. But to whom? Sir Reginald? Or his legacy? He rose, his cane tapping. Thank you, mademoiselle. We shall speak again. As they left, Hastings whispered, She's convincing, Poirot. But that lineage, revenge is a strong motive. And the pistol from the garden, it's hers. Poirot nodded. Yet the pistol, like the button, is too convenient. Someone uses her past to paint her guilty. We must return to the estate. The Caldwell Manor was a hive of tension when they arrived, the evening sky now a bruise of purple and grey. Lady Eleanor, informed of Amelia's lineage, sat in the drawing room, her face a mask of shock and anger. His daughter, she spat, her handkerchief crumpled in her fist. That explains everything. Her closeness, his secrecy. She killed him to claim his fortune. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm. Madame, let us not leap to conclusions. The will, have you seen its final version? Lady Eleanor hesitated, her eyes flickering. The lawyer, the lineage, it shifts the motive. Amelia, scorned by her father. Lady Eleanor, threatened by a rival heir. Hargrove, blackmailed. Edmund, disinherited.
He turned to Japp. "Inspector, have you checked Monsieur Hargrove's alibi for the shooting?" Japp nodded. "Solid. He was in the drawing room with us when the shot was fired, and Edmund was in the library, sulking. Lady Eleanor was upstairs, resting." Poirot's gaze drifted to the mantel, where the photograph of Caldwell and Amelia still stood. And the butler, Grayson, always present, yet unseen. Japp snorted. "Grayson? Loyal as a dog, been with the family 20 years. "Even dogs bite," Poirot murmured. He requested Grayson's presence, but the butler was absent, called away to the village, a maid said. Suspicious, but not conclusive. The investigation deepened as Poirot requested the will's exact wording. The lawyer, summoned hastily, arrived with documents. "Sir Reginald altered it 2 days before his death," he confirmed. "Lady Eleanor inherits, but if an illegitimate heir is acknowledged, the estate splits, half to charity, half to the heir, unless contested." Amelia, summoned again, stood defiant. "I didn't know about the will change until after. I only wanted his name, not his money." Edmund, hovering nearby, muttered, "She's lying. I saw her arguing with father at the office, heard her say, 'You'll regret this.'" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "When was this, monsieur?" Edmund faltered. "Day before he died. I was there to beg for money." Another thread. Poirot turned to the note again. "Iron will bend." "An anagram, perhaps," he mused aloud, rearranging the letters mentally. "No, too simple. It is symbolic, his empire, his will, his secrets." He tested the watch theory again, consulting a clockmaker's manual in his pocket. The watch, smashed deliberately, confirms the timeline is false. Death was after 1150, likely 12 or later. The mist returned, cloaking the city in secrecy. Somewhere, the killer watched, their heart racing as Poirot's deductions drew closer to the truth. Chapter 8. The Threatening Letter. The Caldwell estate stood sombre under a leaden October sky, its Georgian facade muted by the drizzle that had resumed in the early hours of 1932 London. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves, a fitting backdrop for the mounting tension within the manor's walls. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat glistening with raindrops, stood in the grand drawing room, the anonymous letter, "Stop or Die," clutched in his gloved hand. Its scrawled words, delivered to his apartment the previous night, were a stark warning that the killer was not only desperate, but dangerously close. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the steadfast companion, stood by the fire, his face etched with unease as he watched Poirot pace, the click of his cane a metronome to his racing thoughts. Inspector Japp, his cigarette smoke curling like a spectre, guarded the door with 2 constables, ensuring no one could slip away. The suspects, Lady Eleanor Caldwell, Victor Hargrove, Amelia Thorne, and Edmund Caldwell, sat in a tense tableau, their eyes darting between Poirot and each other, each concealing secrets beneath a veneer of composure. Poirot held up the letter, his voice resonant yet calm, commanding the room's attention. "Mes amis, the killer grows bold, sending me this threat to cease my inquiries. But Hercule Poirot does not yield to intimidation. The truth, it is near, and the shadows, they begin to lift." He paused, letting the words settle, his green eyes scanning the faces before him. "Let us review the tapestry of this crime.
The glove, marked VH, stolen to implicate Monsieur Hargrove. The button, embroidered AT, placed to accuse Mademoiselle Thorne. The watch, stopped at 11:45, a deliberate lie to obscure the time of death. The note, my birthright, and left at 11:50. I didn't kill him. Her voice cracked, tears threatening, but she held Poirot's gaze. That letter you're holding. It's another frame-up, like the button and my pistol. Edmund, slouched by the window, muttered, She's right about one thing. Father was a liar. Said he'd cut me out, then mocks me at the bridge when I begged. I left him alive at 11:55. His hands shook, the mud on his shoes still a damning clue. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. The timeline, it is critical. Let us clarify with the aid of the autopsy, which I have reviewed with Inspector Japp. He nodded to Japp, who produced a report. Rigor mortis and body temperature place Sir Reginald's death at approximately 12:05, not 11:45 as the watch suggests. Monsieur Hargrove, you left at 11:40. Mademoiselle Thorne, you claim 11:50. Monsieur Edmund, 11:55. Madame Caldwell, you arrived at 12:10, finding the body. The killer struck between 11:55 and 12:05, a narrow window. Japp interjected, his voice gruff. And we've got a witness, a tramp, who heard screams at 12:05, saw a woman in a dark coat fleeing. Sounds like Miss Thorne to me. Amelia's face flushed with anger. I was in Soho by 12. My friends will swear to it. That tramp's lying, or paid. Her eyes darted to Hargrove, a silent accusation. Poirot's moustache twitched. A paid witness, perhaps? Most interesting. But let us examine another clue, the dagger. He produced a sketch of the ornate weapon, its handle engraved with, To Amelia, from R. Mademoiselle Thorne, you admitted Sir Reginald gave you this dagger years ago, yet it was used to kill him, and stolen from your flat, you claim. Amelia nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, I kept it as a memento. It was taken last week, along with my pistol. Someone's using my things to frame me. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Eleanor, clean of fingerprints. But I have found a hair, brunette, caught in the handle's engraving. He held up a small evidence bag, the hair barely visible. It matches Mademoiselle Thorne's. But could it be planted? Like the button. Amelia gasped. Planted? Someone took my hairbrush. It's been missing for days. Japp snorted. Convenient, that. Everything's stolen. Your pistol, your dagger, your brush. Next you'll say the note was planted too. Poirot raised a hand. The note. Iron will bend. It is from Sir Reginald's private stock, accessible to Mademoiselle Thorne, Madame Caldwell, and perhaps Monsieur Edmund. But the threatening letter to me, it is on common paper, scrawled in haste. The killer's hand shakes. Their fear grows. He turned to Hargrove. Monsieur, you claim blackmail. Did Sir Reginald mention a specific enemy? Hargrove hesitated, then nodded. He said someone was digging into his past. Old sins, he called them. Didn't name names, but he was rattled. I thought it was just his paranoia. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Eleanor. And you, madame, you visited the bridge at 12:10, you say. Yet the dock worker claims he saw you earlier, in a shawl, near 11:30.
Lady Eleanor's face paled, her voice sharp. "That man's mistaken. I went to confront Reginald about his dalliance with her." She pointed at Amelia. "He was dead when I arrived. I swear." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Yet you touched nothing, except to drop a button. Most curious." He turned to Edmund. "And you, monsieur, your disguise receipt, the mud on your shoes. You returned to the bridge, perhaps?" Edmund's face drained of colour. "I told you. I begged for money and left. The disguise was for a ball. The mud from walking home." His voice cracked, his hands trembling. Hastings whispered to Poirot, "He's cracking, old chap. And that hair on the dagger, Hargrove." "No one! I'm telling the truth."
Hargrove roared, "That's a lie! I never saw this man before."
Poirot's moustache twitched. "Yet your man, a clerk from your office, was seen near the bridge that night. Did you pay him to pay Tompkins?" Hargrove's face reddened, but he shook his head.
"I paid my clerk to watch Caldwell, yes, for business reasons, but not to lie."
Poirot nodded, filing this away. "The web tightens. The tramp's testimony, it is tainted. The killer uses others to obscure the truth." He turned to Amelia. "Mademoiselle, you said Sir Reginald was haunted by his past. Did he mention a specific wrong, perhaps tied to your mother?" Amelia's tears returned. "He said he loved her once, but his family forced him to abandon her. He regretted it, but not enough to claim me." Lady Eleanor's voice was icy. "How touching. Yet you killed him for it." Amelia stood, her voice fierce. "I didn't. I wanted his name, not his life." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough. The evidence points in many directions, but the truth lies in the details. The dagger's hair, the watch's lie, the planted button, all serve to confuse, but the timeline, it is clear. Death at 12:05. Mademoiselle Fawn, you left at 11:50. Monsieur Edmund, 11:55. Madame Caldwell, 12:10. Monsieur Hargrove, 11:40. One of you returned, or another was present, unseen." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes on the photograph of Caldwell and Amelia. "The past. It haunts this crime," he murmured to Hastings. "Amelia's lineage, Caldwell's sins. They are the key. But the killer, they are clever, using every clue to point elsewhere." Outside, the drizzle thickened, cloaking the estate in mist. Poirot stood by the garden path, the threatening letter in his pocket. "Stop or die," he whispered. Hargrove, Amelia Thorne, and Edmund Caldwell sat in a strained semicircle, their expressions a mix of fear, defiance, and guilt. The cryptic note, "Iron will bend," and the revelation of Amelia's lineage as Sir Reginald Caldwell's illegitimate daughter had tightened the noose of suspicion, and Poirot's little grey cells were poised to unravel the final threads of this intricate mystery. Poirot raised a hand, his voice steady and resonant, cutting through the room's tension like a blade. "Mes amis, the storm gathers, both without and within. The murder of Sir Reginald Caldwell, it is a puzzle of misdirection. Glove, button, watch, note, poison, gunshot, all woven to obscure the truth. But the little grey cells, they see through the fog. Tonight, we approach the heart of this crime." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle, his gaze sweeping over the suspects. Let us begin with the timeline, clarified by the autopsy. Death occurred at 12:05, not 11:45, as the smashed watch suggests. Monsieur Hargrove, you left the bridge at 11:40. Mademoiselle Thorne, 11:50. Monsieur Edmund, 11:55. Madame Caldwell, you arrived at 12:10, finding the body. The killer struck in that narrow window, between 11:55 and 12:05. Lady Eleanor, her black mourning dress stark against her pale skin, clutched her handkerchief, her voice trembling with indignation. You accuse us all, Monsieur Poirot, yet offer no proof. I found Reginald dead, as I've said. I went to confront him about his indiscretions with her. Her eyes flicked to Amelia, venomous. Amelia stood, her dark hair loose, her expression fierce. I've told you, I left at 11:50, after he refused to acknowledge me as his daughter. I was in Soho by 12:15. A cabby saw me. I didn't kill him. Her voice cracked, tears welling, but her defiance held. Hargrove, his arm still bandaged from the gunshot, snorted from his armchair. To confuse the timeline. He paused, his cane tapping rhythmically. And the note, iron will bend, a symbol of breaking Sir Reginald's empire, his will, or his secrets. Japp interjected, his voice gruff. And the tramp, Poirot. He heard screams at 12:05, saw a woman in a dark coat fleeing. Matches Miss Thorne's description. Amelia's face flushed with anger. I told you he's lying. Or paid. I was in Soho, and the cabby confirms it. Check with him. Poirot nodded, his expression enigmatic. We have, mademoiselle. The cabby places you in his taxi at 12:10, heading to Soho. A tight timeline, but possible. Yet the tramp's story, it falters. He turned to Japp. Inspector, your men found the tramp's payment, a banknote traced to Monsieur Hargrove's clerk. Hargrove roared, slamming his fist on the armrest. That's nonsense. I told my clerk to watch Caldwell, yes, for business reasons, but I didn't pay anyone to lie about screams. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Yet your clerk was near the bridge, monsieur. A coincidence, or a piece of the puzzle? He turned to the room. The tramp's testimony, it is tainted. Screams at 12:05, a woman fleeing, yet Mademoiselle Thorne's alibi holds. So who was this woman? Lady Eleanor's voice was sharp. It could have been anyone, a stranger, a vagrant. Why focus on us? Poirot's smile was faint but piercing. Because, madame, the clues point inward. The dagger, the note, the button, all tie to this household. And the will, let us not forget the will. He beckoned the lawyer, who had arrived earlier with documents. Monsieur, you confirmed Sir Reginald altered his will 2 days before his death. What are the details? The lawyer, a thin man with spectacles, cleared his throat. The estate goes to Lady Eleanor, but with a codicil. If an illegitimate heir is acknowledged, the fortunes split, half to charity, half to the heir, unless contested by the family. Sir Reginald added this clause recently, as if skeptical. Oui, but the killer's hand is too cunning. The planted clues, the tainted witness, they point to Mademoiselle Thorne, yet her alibi holds. He turned to the group. Let us test another detail. The screams at 12:05, heard by the tramp. Mademoiselle Thorne, you said you argued with Sir Reginald. Did you strike him? Amelia hesitated, then nodded. I slapped him, in anger, when he laughed at me. But no screams. I left him standing there. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A slap, not a scream. The tramp's story, it crumbles further. He turned to Jap. Arrest him, Inspector. He is a tool of the killer, paid to mislead. Jap nodded, signaling a constable to fetch the tramp. Got it, Poirot. But we're running out of leads. The evidence keeps circling back to her. He pointed at Amelia. Poirot shook his head. No, Inspector. The evidence is a mask. Consider the physical clues. The dagger's hair, planted, perhaps from Mademoiselle Thorne's brush, missing from her flat. The button, placed atop the mud, not trodden in. The glove, stolen from Monsieur Hargrove. The killer uses their possessions to weave a false narrative. As the group absorbed this, a maid rushed in, her face pale. "Sirs, I found something in Monsieur Edmund's room." She held out a second dagger, identical to the murder weapon, its handle engraved, "To Amelia, from R." Edmund gasped, leaping to his feet. "That's not mine. I've never seen it." Amelia's voice was shrill. "Another frame-up. That was stolen with the first." Poirot examined the dagger, his fingers tracing the engraving. A second dagger, identical. Most curious. The killer. They are bold, planting evidence even now. He turned to Edmund. "Monsieur, your room. Who has access?" Edmund stammered. "The maids, Grayson, anyone who visits. I didn't put it there." Lady Eleanor's voice was icy. "He's lying." To shift blame. He turned to Amelia. "Mademoiselle, your coat. Examined yesterday. It had blood on the hem, hidden in the lining. Explain." Amelia's face drained of color. "Blood? That's impossible. I haven't worn that coat since the bridge. Someone must have tampered with it." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Tampered, oui. The killer grows careless, their web fraying." He addressed the room. "The storm gathers, mes amis. The truth is near, but one more piece remains. Tomorrow we shall confront it." As the group dispersed, the manor's clocks chimed, their echoes haunting. Outside, thunder rumbled, the storm breaking at last. Poirot stood by the window, the threatening letter in hand. "The killer panics," he murmured to Hastings. "The daggers, the blood, the note, they weave a false trail. But the little grey cells see through it. The shadow moves, but we are closer." In the darkness beyond, the rain lashed the estate, and the killer, hidden in the storm, felt the noose tighten, their next move uncertain. Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. The Caldwell Estate's drawing room was a crucible of tension, its high ceilings and gilded walls seeming to close in as the storm outside raged on, lashing the windows with sheets of rain. It was the evening of October 1932, and London's fog had crept back, curling around the manor like a conspirator in the unfolding drama. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's centre, his small frame radiating an almost palpable authority, his green eyes gleaming with the clarity of a mind that had pieced together the final fragments of Sir Reginald Caldwell's murder. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal companion, stood by the fire, his notebook clutched tightly, his face a mixture of anticipation and dread. Inspector Japp, his cigarette replaced by a stern frown, flanked the door with his constables, ensuring no one could escape the reckoning. The suspects, Lady Eleanor Caldwell, Victor Hargrove, Amelia Thorne, and Edmund Caldwell, sat indignation.
"Monsieur Poirot, this is intolerable. You've accused us all,
Yet the killer remains free. I demand justice for my husband." Hargrove, his arm bandaged, growled from his armchair. "Justice? Caldwell was a blackmailer, and I'm the one shot at. Get on with it, Poirot. Name the culprit." His ruddy face was flushed with impatience, his whiskey glass empty. Amelia Thorne, her dark hair loose, stood defiant, her eyes blazing. "It's not me. I've been framed. My button, my pistol, my dagger, even my hair. I left him alive at 11:50, and my alibi holds." Her voice cracked, betraying her fear. Edmund, slouched by the window, muttered, "Father deserved it, but I didn't do it. I left the bridge at 11:55, mud or no mud." His hands shook. The second dagger found in his room, a damning clue. Poirot's moustache twitched, his cane tapping rhythmically. "Let us reconstruct the night of the crime, with the clarity of the autopsy and the witnesses. Sir Reginald died at 12:05, not 11:45, as the smashed watch suggests. Monsieur Hargrove, you met him at 11:30, paid your blackmail, and left by 11:40. Mademoiselle Thorne, you argued at midnight, leaving at 11:50. Monsieur Edmund, you begged for money, departing at 11:55. Madame Caldwell, you arrived at 12:10, finding him dead. The killer struck in that narrow window between 11:55 and 12:05. Japp interjected, his voice gruff. "And the tramp, paid by Hargrove's clerk, heard screams at 12:05, saw a woman fleeing. But Miss Thorne's cabbie alibi checks out. She was in Soho by 12:15. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Oui, the tramp's testimony. It is tainted, a lie bought to mislead. The screams, perhaps a slap, as Mademoiselle Thorne admitted.
Soft but piercing.
Mademoiselle, you admitted arguing with your father at midnight. You slapped him, yes, but left him alive. Your alibi, the cabbie, confirms you left by 12:10. Yet blood was found on your coat's hem, hidden in the lining." Amelia gasped, her face paling. "That's impossible. I haven't worn that coat since the bridge. Someone tampered with it." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to the others. "Tampered, oui. The killer uses your possessions, dagger, pistol, hair, button, to paint you guilty. But one clue betrays them." He produced the dagger again, pointing to the handle. "The fingerprints, wiped clean, but under a layer of blood, faint traces remain. Yours, Mademoiselle Thorne, missed in the killer's haste." Amelia's eyes widened, her voice a whisper. "No, that can't be. I didn't." Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "The truth, it is clear. The killer is Mademoiselle Amelia Thorne, not for love, nor for inheritance, but for revenge." He paced, his cane clicking. "You were Sir Reginald's daughter, abandoned, your mother left to die in poverty. You became his secretary to confront him, to force recognition. At the bridge, you argued, slapped him, left, but returned after 11:55, driven by years of resentment. You stabbed him at 12:05, using the dagger he gave you, a cruel irony. You set the watch back to 11:45, planted Hargrove's glove, your own button, and paid the tramp to lie about screams." Amelia's face crumpled, tears streaming. "No, I loved him, despite everything. I didn't kill him." Poirot's voice softened, but his resolve was iron. "You planned it meticulously, mademoiselle. The poison in Lady Eleanor's tea, to feign a victim. The shot at Monsieur Hargrove, a diversion to muddy the waters. The second dagger in Monsieur Edmund's room, to shift blame. The note, 'Iron will bend,' your vow to break your father's empire, his legacy, his denial of you." Amelia sank to her knee.
The blood. Poirot's eyes gleamed.
"The little grey cells, Hastings, the fingerprints, faint but present, were preserved by the blood's drying. The killer wiped the handle, but not thoroughly. The timeline, her alibi, tight but possible, allowed a return to the bridge. The note, 'Iron will bend,' was personal, tied to her mother's ruin. The red herrings, glove, button, hair, all pointed to her, but too perfectly, until the truth emerged. Lady Eleanor rose, her voice trembling. "Why the bridge, Monsieur Poirot? Why there?" Poirot turned to her, his expression sombre. "The bridge, madame, was symbolic. His iron empire, his pride. Mademoiselle Thorne chose it to bend his legacy, to make him pay where he stood tallest." As the constables escorted Amelia out, the storm broke fully, lightning illuminating the manor's windows. Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "You've done it again, Poirot. Case closed, clean as a whistle." Poirot nodded, but his eyes were distant. "Clean, oui, but tragic. A daughter's pain, a father's sins. These are the shadows that linger." Hastings closed his notebook, his voice soft. "A sad business, Poirot. She was so young, so wronged." Poirot sighed, adjusting his hat. "The heart, it seeks justice, but sometimes finds only vengeance. Come, mon ami. The fog lifts, and justice prevails." Outside, the rain pounded the estate, washing away the last traces of deception. The iron bridge, silent in the distance, stood as a monument to a fallen titan and a daughter's retribution. Poirot and Hastings stepped into the night. The case resolved, but the weight of human frailty heavy on their minds.